This is an EQU Power Hour and inspired by our EQU podcast, which has been really popular and people have enjoyed hearing from graduates from the last 27 years. We also realize what people love is this community. And with the podcast, you can just listen and get inspired. But we started the EQU Power Hour as a way for our grads to do kind of a 20-minute TED style talk on an area of expertise that they have, and then interact with everybody and actually take audience questions for the rest of the hour. So tonight we have with us an amazing gentleman. His name is Arty Molinari. He is a graduate of LV217. He's a dad of three. He is an architect and a lifelong entrepreneur. And one of the things that he's learned in being an entrepreneur is the most important thing to understand is our finances. And so we are thrilled to have with us tonight Arty Molinari. And Arty, I will turn things over to you. Welcome to the EQU.
Thank you so much, Kareen, and thank you, Robin, also for having me, and Choice Center, of course. Again, with that lovely introduction, I appreciate it. I don't really want to talk too much about myself, but really what I've learned in my short life. I just turned 36, and it's interesting how, even though I wasn't allowed to talk about money at the dinner table, that was really frustrating. You know, money didn't grow on trees and things like that. And then when I joined the architecture profession, one of the first things that almost every professor said was, if you're in this career for the money, we suggest you walk out now. So that was a kind of eye-opening statement. And of course, you're egotistic, young, and you want to be there, so you're not going to get up and leave, right? That's too scary to do anyway. So you're going to just stay seated and carry on. So yeah, I mean, I am extremely passionate about finances, taxes, having multiple streams of income, and by having that knowledge, it can allow you to be independent to the maximum level. Of course, what I learned in Choice was actually a lot more effective than those things. But prior to my experience at Choice, I decided that, okay, even though I'm a designer, I'm an artist, I love to draw, I love to write, read, and create, make things. I also have children at a young age. I got 3, as Kareen mentioned, and they're expensive, and I am expensive too. So I was like, yeah, I don't enjoy living paycheck to paycheck. And yeah, it took me too long, in my opinion, to decide to make a change. And when people ask me the question, oh, when did you decide that you wanted to go on your own? For me, it was actually, I mean, it's something I've always wanted to do. I've always had that entrepreneurial spirit, but when I actually got the courage to shift really was COVID. And it was a forceful situation because my job at the time was taking advantage of the PPP, financing that the government was offering small businesses. And during that period, my paycheck was reduced 40%. And I was, like I said, I was already paycheck to paycheck, and cutting it in the slightest was going to be a real issue for my family. So I had to make a choice. I was already moonlighting, as we call it, in the design and architecture profession, which basically just means you're working a side hustle. At that time, I wasn't a licensed architect, so really my title on my business card was designer or junior architect. And so in order for me to get additional money for leisure, really, not even investments, was to draw at night till like 2-3 in the morning every day. And even with that kind of hustle, I was lucky if I was bringing in an extra 10,000 a year. But at 25 years old, an extra 10K a year, you could say 1,000 a month, basically. That was huge money for me. That was life-changing money. If I didn't do that, I couldn't have taken my children on vacations. I couldn't even have bought them gifts for their birthday, Christmas, whatever. So I had to do that. Now I say I get to do that after learning nicely from Choice. It's been, that the lessons I learned during my 20s were unbelievable. And, we always like to complain sometimes when life gets challenging. But I now appreciate that, when I take responsibility for my life, things happen because of me, not to me. And with that mindset, I have really been able to shift the way I operate. So, just so you guys know, the work ethic may have always been there with me because I have entrepreneurial parents. My dad was a contractor. Even though as a kid, my mom was a project manager in a power plant, she is now a pretty bona fide entrepreneur with many income streams. She grew up on a farm. She's a fifth generational farmer, which means technically I'm sixth generation, even though I don't do agricultural work. I do design agricultural buildings though. And even though my dad is no longer with us, he just watching how happy he was being in control of his own destiny was always inspiring when I would visit from England to spend my summer holidays and winter break holidays with him. He never really told me what to do. He just would always laugh and smile and say, look, son, like in order for me to live like this, I just have to be in control and make my own money. And I had jobs and career as a plumber before I became a contractor. And like I said, just having parents, even though they weren't together, I did have step parents as well. Everyone just had a really positive influence on me. Even though I was raised with a lot of discipline, which I needed, probably still need, it allowed me to just, really focus and appreciate what it takes to just make anything happen. So I kind of took that work ethic into my schooling. When I moved here from England to Florida, that's where I am right now. Go Owls, that's my alma mater right here, where I got my bachelor's degree from. Before that, I actually got to attend West Boca Raton High School. I didn't know that was going to happen. I thought I was just going to, I graduated high school already in England. And I thought I was going to go to college right away in the States. And they were like, yeah, your transcripts are foreign. We don't understand them. I told them it's in English. They said, well, not our English. So I said, all right, well, what do I need to do? And they said, well, you got to go back to high school. That's probably the easiest thing to do. And then while you're there, they'll curate the transcripts, which will help you get into college. And then while you're at it, do the SAT, ACT. And I was like, well, that's basically what Americans have to do. And they were like, yeah, that's what you're going to do. And I was just like, okay. So I graduated high school twice, which was fun. But interestingly, my senior year, I wanted an easy senior year. So when I moved here, because my birthday's September 9th, I thought I was only going to have to do a senior year. They were like, well, because your birthday is September 9th, that's after the cutoff, you're actually going to get held back a year. So in the end, I had to do 2 years of high school. Junior was brutal for me academically because it was just really frustrating. I felt like I was learning stuff that I learned when I was 12, but by the time I got to senior year, I made a lot of friends. Relationships was key. I lettered in 3 sports, soccer, basketball, and football. And that was a lot of fun. And then by the time I was in my senior year, I was like, you know what? I'm going to take it easy academically because I want to make money. And the high school I was at had a program called OJT, which is on the job training. And so as part of that class, I had to, enroll into a company. I had to be legitimate. I had to have a W-2 or at least a 1099 form for employment. And I actually worked at the Sports Authority, if anyone remembers that. In the Northeast, you have Modell's. Now I think the rest of the country has Dick's, which bought a lot of their stores. But I was there for only a semester because I ended up getting shot in the leg there, which is another story for another time. Let's just say there was a crazy employee there that didn't know how to handle guns well. Yeah, and I was a victim, even though I don't like to say that in that situation, but it was definitely something that was unavoidable on my part, but that was another lesson learned. And I happened to be the kicker on the football team, so that really affected my performance for a couple of months. But anyway, once I got out of high school, I realized that architecture was going to be my backup plan because even though I considered myself a really good athlete, the discipline was not there for sports, even though I did it my whole life and, I was great at sports. I'm only 5'10", 170. I couldn't bench press more than 225 pounds once, so it just wasn't going to happen. Luckily, though, I remember from 9 years old, being into Legos, drawing, sketching, reading history books with architecture and things of that nature. And when that came about to me as an option to major in college, it just said yes to me immediately, and I couldn't wait to do it. So basically at 18, that's when I knew again that architecture was going to be my career. And I kind of jumped in the deep end there, full throttle. I mentioned that, you know, a lot of people, I don't know if you want to interrupt me, you can if you want with the questions, or we'll wait till the Q&A. But a lot of people say to me, oh, when was that like moment where you feel like you made it, financially? I remember it clear as day. It was like my third job in architecture, where I went from like being a drafts person to like an actual architectural designer. Like that's like bragging rights in our field. And I remember getting a contract presented to me for like, it was under 49,000 a year, and I was just like over the moon. I'd never like made that much money in my life. I had 2 kids at the time. Like I felt like a gangster. I'm like, yes, finally made it. And then all of a sudden, I'm renting a house. I have a lease on a car. Luckily, I owned my truck at the time because my dad put down the down payment for me in high school, and that was one of his company trucks that I took over the payment. But I felt like I made it. And then all of a sudden, with expenses and life just, never getting cheaper, I was like, this isn't enough. And so I wrote it out for a year because I was told, when you have your annual review, you'll get a raise. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, cool. And then, almost every week I'm calculating what that raise should be at a bare minimum. And so I come up with a number in my head, and I'm thinking 60,000. When I hit 60,000, then I'll be good. Annual review comes around 3 months after the year, by the way. I still hold on to that a little bit as well. I haven't let go of that one. But no, I get a 1.5% raise on like, let's just say 49,000. So I don't remember what the math was again, but it was like 52, 53. It was annoying to say the least, but I had to be grateful. I was humble. I was, excited to still be in that company, and I was like, you know what? I'm gonna ask them for a raise in like 6 months because I deserve it, and I make them 4 times what they pay me anyway. So let's go for it. And I was in for another rude awakening because 6 months I did have the courage to go in there and ask for it, but then the operations manager at the time said, well, you actually need to make at least 3 times your salary in order for us to even justify your position. I was like, okay, I need to make 6 times then what I make, so then I can have the courage to ask again. So this cycle kept repeating for years. I remember by my third year, I did get a bonus that floored me at the time. It was like, I think it was like $8,000, something that, like, if I could just do that while having a conversation with someone today, just by spurring up an opportunity with investors. But back then, I mean, that was, again, life-changing money for me and my family. And that was just enough to hook me and keep me in, right? And then the fourth year, the bonus was 10,000. The fifth year went up to 15,000 because they needed to show their respect and gratitude for me as well. And then, even though they say never talk about how much you earn at a company, of course everyone talks about it. So I at least as a group we felt loved and appreciated, and I was happy with that. But then COVID happened and everything changed, and we were told to be patient. And I think, as patient as they come. But when push comes to shove, and you're literally stuck between a rock and a hard place, as some might say, I couldn't wait in this situation. I generated an opportunity within myself to jump off the deep end, as I keep saying, and do something bold. And that was start my own company. So while I was still hired, I started my own company, which is a fireable offense apparently in a lot of places. But I was like, well, as long as it's not a conflict of interest, what mama don't know won't hurt her, like, all of those type of, phrases. And I did that. And the good thing about doing that was that all those moonlighting sessions I was doing over the years, it actually now legitimized the side income that I was making. And then what was good about that, for like the 6 months that I was still employed, when I did my taxes the following year, I was now legally allowed to deduct that from, my income with the expenses that I had with my business. And now I was like kicking myself. I was like, oh my goodness, like if I did this much sooner, I could have been saving a ton of money and then reallocating that to my family. And then, I wouldn't be so hard on myself, all of these things, right? So I learned a lesson really quickly there. And that's pretty much the number one advice that I give high schoolers, or at the very latest, when I go into colleges and I talk at, my alma mater as well, architecture students. They're like, oh, if you could tell me like one thing that would be like, you know, really good advice or life changing, I'm like, start a business. Yeah, but I don't really know what I want. I just, whatever your hobby is, whatever you're passionate about, just create the LLC. Artie loves apples, like whatever it is, and you can always change the name, or do a DBA. What's a DBA? Doing business as. We'll get into that later. And then at least now you're legitimate. You're going to be paying taxes if you earn some income over $600. Now all of a sudden I'm not even an architect. I'm giving them financial advice, which sometimes well, most of the time I probably shouldn't, right? When you have financial advisors, you need to really do your homework on who gives you that type of advice. But I feel pretty good if I'm twice the age of someone giving them the advice, because at least I can help them mitigate a lot of the failures that I experience. But I always remind them, hey, these are critical, necessary, in my opinion, events that happen in one's life. And I could help you bypass them, but honestly, if you want to be a resilient human being, I suggest, that you go through at least a couple of them. I mean, you don't need to go through the 100 that I went through, but like, so yeah, starting a business is always like my number one advice that I give people.
And what are your tips for that? Like, what did you learn in starting a business, and should people be starting it like while they're, employed elsewhere?
Yeah, I mean, the problem is if you talk to your employer about it, they're gonna usually 9 times out of 10 discourage you. And pre-choice, I would have a negative response to that. But now I just say, you know what? If you're not around or surrounded by people, including your employer, that don't encourage you to be all that you can be and maximize your output as a human being, then they're probably not the right people that you need in your life, not even want, right? So, but that's also tough because I definitely don't want to encourage people to quit their jobs and do something crazy. But at the same time, it's not illegal. So if anyone tells you that, that's bad or poor advice, and it's only going to benefit you. And it's allowing you to discover parts of yourself that you didn't even realize were there, or you dreamt about them being there and you were probably too afraid of tapping into that person, which is probably your true authentic self anyway. So yeah, I take everything back what I just said. Do it. Like, because if you're working, for a paycheck and you're helping someone else achieve their dreams, that's a beautiful thing, obviously, and do that for as long as you want. But you should definitely do that for yourself first. So then I jump into my other way of earning income, but really I call it buying your net worth. And I've actually read this in many books, but I read it after I had already started doing it myself, which actually made me feel pretty good. I was like, oh, wow, I'm actually doing something. If I'm reading about it in best-selling books, like I'm actually doing something good and no one even taught me this. Like I'm just doing it naturally. And that is life insurance. So again, if you don't have children and you're not married, it's probably not like the best thing that you can do. But I'll tell you what, with a lot of the situations that I've been in, which are nothing compared to multimillionaires that I know, it allows you to be your own bank. And a lot of financial institutions frown against giving that advice, but it's literally what they've been created for, especially for wealthy individuals. There's a book out there called The Rockefeller Method. Whether you like the Rockefellers or not, it's irrelevant. Just because the original John D may not have been the nicest guy, he's a little ruthless and monopolized the oil industry. But what his family are doing 6 or 7 generations later is beautiful compared to what their great 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 grandfather was doing with their trust fund and foundations. They're actually not allowed to touch their money unless they have a meeting with the lawyer that is the trustee of the account, and then they have to write an essay asking, for the money, the amount, and what it's for, and then it has to get approved by a board of directors. This sounds like really stressful, right? Like, who would want to go through that? Well, guess what you're doing when you go to a bank and you ask for a loan to buy a car or your first home, and they literally ask you for your unborn child in documentation to then give you a 9% interest loan, and you would rather do that and pay someone you don't know or care about because it just seems like a more traditional idea. It's mind blowing to me. So, buying your net worth with a life insurance policy and then being able to borrow from yourself. And yes, guess what? You are going to pay the loan back because you're paying yourself back, not a bank, not a third party institution. In my opinion, it's actually the safest, smartest, and it's above inflation as well. Those policies at their weakest are like 4.5%. And if you have a 4.5% interest earning life insurance policy, you can do better than that for sure. But I own one of those, and once I learned that that was, not a strong one, I just did better next time and found other institutions that do better. And now it's actually in my interest to get as many as possible. I'm what they call over-insured. Life insurance companies don't even want to insure me anymore because they're like, you're too poor for how much you're insured. And then I actually I like to brag about that now. I'm like, okay, so how do I get richer now to get, more insurance that can actually take care of my family too? Because that's another thing. Listen, as healthy and young as I am, all it could take is a car accident or me playing soccer, breaking a leg, touch wood, it doesn't happen. But now I'm incapacitated and I can't earn the income that I was before and pay the bills. Those policies protect you from that. So it's actually income protection. It's not just life insurance. It's not just you buying your net worth and being your own bank. It's protecting your entire family while you're alive, not just when you die. So I'm extremely passionate about that. So we'll leave that one there. So we've got business, we've got life insurance. So the next one I like to tell people, especially people who don't make a lot of money, is a Roth IRA.
And
I'm not a fan.
before you go into Roth IRA, we actually do have a question from Andrea.
Okay.
So is that a whole life policy? Can you give us a little bit more details about
Ah,
how you buy your
so you do want to get into the weeds. Okay. So yeah, if you know anything about life insurance, there's whole life policies, there's term policies, there's variable policies. The accounts that I'm talking about are whole life. You want to be careful though, because whole life has now got, it's almost like Christianity. There's many different kinds, right? So, you know, this is where having a financial advisor or at least a close friend or family member that has these policies as well, that you can at least talk to them about it before committing to anything. But a term policy, you can't do what I'm talking about. Term means that you're just making a monthly payment. All it's doing is, when you die, that money will go to a beneficiary, and you can tell yourself that at least you're being responsible for your family, because you don't really have anything in the bank to give them when you pass. Term is good if you're either older or just can't afford whole life, and you want to do the right thing, especially if you have children. But whole life, even though it's a more expensive monthly commitment, remember it's something that is creating an asset. They call it cash value. Once you've had the policy for a certain amount of time, once you have the right riders in place, especially the rider paid up additions, that's probably the most important rider you should have. The growth, the acceleration of the cash value in those accounts, literally compounds better than stock market, S&P 500, any of that stuff. And then it's tax-free, interest-free when you take out the loans, where you got to pay interest on the loan, but when you pay yourself back, you're basically getting the money back anyway. So that's why I like to say interest-free. It's just a very magical thing that I wish I knew about much sooner. So yeah, if I read a book back in the day called Buy Term and Invest the Difference, and I did do that for a long time. And the difference that I was investing was into my Roth IRA. So that was the third vehicle that I was going to get into. And the reason why a Roth IRA is so powerful is because if you make more than 160,000 a year, you can't have one. So I'm glad I got one back when I was making less than 50K, because once you have it, you're locked in. I made the mistake, and I don't cry about it anymore. I mean, I never cried about it, but I'm not upset about it anymore, because I gave it up when I got divorced. I literally cashed out everything that I had in there to pay for my lawyers. But if I didn't have it, I would have been screwed. I wouldn't have been able to have representation. But the bummer now is that I make more than 160 and I can't get one anymore. And I can't go backwards. Like, I'm not gonna, unless I strategically just make less money and then I qualify for one again. It's one of those things that you don't really want to give up once you get one. And the reason why I say it's powerful is because you're putting in your taxed money, and it's growing tax free, and then it's tax deferred money when you take it out, far more powerful than a traditional IRA, which operates more or less like a more of a controlled 401k. Yeah, when I get into this with my friends, I just tell them, don't, unless you have no other option, your company's telling you they match 4%, what you put in, they'll match 4% or dollar for dollar, like, on a 401k, do it then if you have to. But when you're in my situation, 15 years ago, where I needed to maximize my paycheck just to buy groceries and diapers and baby food, the matching, I didn't have the vision, or I had the vision, but I couldn't justify the sacrifice. So I didn't do it. But once I opened up a Roth IRA, I was only putting in $25 a month. And I could do that. But if I went with the company's 401k and they want me to put in 4% of my paycheck, and they tried to sell me on them matching it, I was like, yeah, that sounds great, but I need that money now. And, I don't expect you to help me with that. So once I learned about the Roth, again, I started with 25 a month for the first couple of years. Then it went to 50. Then I went to 200, 500. The only downer about a Roth IRA is that you can only put in 7,000 a year. And some people might be saying, wow, that's still a lot of money. Yes, it is. If it was more than that, everyone would do it and everyone would be millionaires. So the government was smart on that, on capping it. If you want to put in more than 7,000 a year and do better than a Roth IRA, have a whole life insurance policy with a paid up additions rider with the biggest death benefit that you can get, and it will do way better than any IRA. And if my Angel is on here, he's probably shaking his head saying, Artie, don't give this advice, because guess what? He was the one who was giving me this advice, and he's qualified to talk about this stuff. Well, I'm just letting you know, I take advantage of my policies and they help me drastically in life. So I'm giving out this free information for you. So
You've got another question related to that. Follow up from Andrea. Is there a point when it's considered too late to go whole life? We're in our mid 40s.
no. The only downer to waiting a long time to do it is once you're 35 years old in the life insurance world, or actually just like in the career world, you're considered like peaked. Like after that, it's all downhill after that. You're not hireable anymore. Everyone's sexier than you. In the life insurance industry, they kind of look at that as well. 35 is like anything after 35, you're old now. So that means your monthly premiums are going to be more expensive. If you can afford the monthly payment, then it doesn't matter, because remember, you're paying yourself first anyway. If you get a policy at 20, you might only need to put in $100 a month. If you're 35, you're probably not going to get that. The cheapest you might be able to get is, say, 300. I'm just throwing out round numbers just so that you can comprehend what I'm saying about this. And if you were 50 years old, the cheapest you might be able to get is 500. And you see what I mean? It's just escalating from there. The good thing is, though, remember that 500 is going to you. For the first year or two, depending on the insurance company, they're taking that money, and because they're not stupid, if you die, they're going to pay your family $1 million or whatever your death benefit is. So they need to make sure they get something out of you. But for 2 years, you're basically not going to see any or much growth in your insurance policy. But there are policies out there which can grow quickly, immediately, and it all depends on how much you put in. But with whole life, you're not going to lose because you're literally investing in yourself. Whereas term and other things, you're not. It is kind of like renting a house. Like, yeah, you got a bed, but you have nothing really to, there's no collateral there.
Yeah. And then you've borrowed against your whole life to start businesses?
Yes. So this is another powerful thing about life insurance policies, is that there are no rules. If you've heard of an HSA, which is a health savings account, they have a lot of rules on what you can borrow your money for in order to spend it on. They say you can actually spend it on anything you want, but you're not going to be able to write it off or put it towards something that can be justified as a health expense unless it is on their list that they give you. And this is all on the IRS website. Whole life insurance policy, but there is no rules against what you can take the money out for. Most people that I know that have the same policies or better than me, they're honestly using it for extremely legitimate reasons. Putting their kids through college, buying a car, buying real estate, necessary expenses that we have in life that are annoying if they're unexpected. You get in a car crash and you're waiting for a check from the insurance company to get a new car. Like, you could be waiting a while and they're going to give you an amount that you probably don't like. Well, imagine you take that check, you put it into your whole life insurance policy, it adds to your cash value, growing at 5%, anywhere up to 13%, which does exist. I have an account that does that too. Uh, and then all of a sudden, it's growing at that rate, at that number that you put in. When you take a loan out, that number doesn't decrease. That's the other powerful part. So say you put in 20 grand into the account, and then you take a loan out for 20 grand, that 20 still stays in the policy as the cash value. And now you're taking that 20 grand and you're hopefully buying an asset. If you buy a car, not an asset. If you're buying your house, not an asset. But if you're buying something that's going to put money back in your pocket, wow, that is a powerful thing. And you can pay that off whenever you want. And guess what? If you never pay it off, guess what the life insurance company does? All they do is deduct it from your death benefit. In some instances, why would you ever pay it back? But it's more responsible too, because again, remember, you're paying yourself. But I have an account that I'm in that situation too. But this is the beauty of having multiple accounts. I've got an account that I feel really good about. I always pay it back. I'm loyal to that one because it makes the most interest. But then the other one that kind of pisses me off because it's only 4.5% interest, I don't like paying that one back. And I'm okay with it because it's got a $2 million death benefit. And if I only owe them 20 grand and now my death benefit is 1,980,000, I can live with that. I'm pretty sure my kids will be okay with that if when they get it when I die. I can justify it.
I love it. So people should start a business. They should get life insurance. They should start a Roth IRA. Anything else important about building those extra streams of income?
The next one is the most important one, and that is your health. So I'm going to take a little siesta right now, and I started this in LV, so you might know what's coming. In leadership, before every call, I would do 44 push-ups because 4 is up. So that's what I'm going to do right now. And if you don't care about your health, then everything that you do is pointless. I had back pain for pretty much my whole 20s because of sports and whatever. And I felt like, oh, I'm just going to go to the gym. I feel strong. I got a six pack or, arms that I'm proud of. It didn't do anything for me. Now I don't have abs. I have arms that I'm not really that proud of. But guess what? I don't have back pain. And that's because I stretch an hour a day. I meditate for at least 20 minutes a day. I read and write. I'm getting tired now. For about 30 minutes a day. I just got to do 10 more. 9, 8, 7. Oh, God, I don't even know if I could do it. 6, 5.
You can do it.
2.
You got it. Go, Artie.
44, baby. So, yeah, that was my morale building during my LV. But seriously, though, health is the most important one. If you're too lazy to do that right now, the other 3. But now that I have those 3, health is always put first.
Beautiful.
And I have one more bonus one. We have hobbies. And in Choice, I learned about be, do, have. I was doing a lot of things, had a lot of things, but I wasn't the person that I wanted to be. So once I rearranged the order, I was able to stretch the way I operated in life. And we put the things that we care about on the back burner. And hobbies was one of those things for me. Whether it be sports, or for me, I like to camp, go off-roading, being out in nature with my children. So doing those things, I was like, that is a time constraint. How can I now apply the hobbies in a financial essence? Started a nonprofit. When you have a nonprofit and you're doing it in a religious or educational way, mine is educational. Now all of a sudden, you have a business structured as a 501c3 where you can raise money for charity in your community, which is something I love to do. But before, when I was doing it, I became, I don't like saying a slave to it, but it was hard making that commitment day in and day out. But once you have an entity structure that you treat like a business and it becomes a lifeline, a bloodline to your life, however you want to call it, now all of a sudden I have a responsibility to make it happen. And this is where the 100% is possible 100% of the time mindset really, exploded in my mind. I was like, whoa, I now understand why and how a lot of wealthy people, higher education facilities, are able to achieve these outrageous goals. So just like when we were in leadership and, we got to come up with our goals and a creative goal, some people, including myself in the beginning, you really limit what you're capable of. When I discovered that one of my juiciest passions was to write a book, I was like, am I just writing this for me? Once I proposed the idea to my university, they were like, you could teach this stuff. And I was like, yeah, that's kind of actually what I want to do, but I don't have the time. Excuses again. They're like, but Artie, you already have your nonprofit. You're already doing this. You're already doing that. You can just literally fit it into your schedule. Again, this was like one of those, if you think your plate's big enough, then just get a bigger plate. And I laugh because this is the advice that I give people. And then I was not, doing it myself. I was, but I was still making excuses. Still make excuses. But once I started doing all 5 things that I've recommended this evening together at once, that's when, if you look at my calendar, people show me calendars and they're like, I'm busy. I'm like, well, that's great, but are you productive? Like, when I show people my calendar, like, I'm not doing it to brag. I'm literally just like, this is why I sleep like a baby every night. Because from the moment I wake up to the moment I lay down, I'm not like exhausted anymore. Like, yes, there are times I'm like, oh, I'm really tired, can't wait for bed. But it's because I've maximized the day. I'm literally at my limit, and I feel amazing about what the day has brought and what I've been able to give. And oh gosh, what was it? Katie Hooper. It'd be cool if Graham was on. That's his mom. She was my discovery coach, and she said to me at the end of discovery, "You give best what you need most." And I need to write that down because I don't quite understand it. And every time I read it every morning when I say my mantra to myself, I was like, what can I give? And when I don't know, I then ask myself, what do I need? What do I want? And then when I give the things that I want to other people, whether they want it or not, it's usually something that's helpful at the very least. Then all of a sudden, my favorite phrase, which is by Zig Ziglar, is if you help enough people get what they want, you'll eventually get what you want. And it's so true. So now by me operating in this nonprofit manner, even though it comes with quite a bit of feedback from people who don't know me, but the ones who do know me, they're like, wow, this is, it's genius. You're now literally able to live your life the way you dreamed about, and now from an income perspective, I don't even complain. Like, is there a number that I always strive for? Sure, but it's not something that keeps me awake at night anymore, because it really doesn't matter. When you work in a giving way, architecture is, we're servants to society in the sense that we're always providing to the community by, helping shape the environment that ends up shaping our personalities, really. But then being able to have fun with it, and the challenge. What's it? I read a lot of books from this guy called Grant Cardone, and a lot of people don't like him. I met him in person, and he was an interesting guy, I'll say, to say the least. I like his books better than him, but even though he writes them. But he said something that agitated me a little bit, where he said, you know, who cares about the journey? It's all about the destination. When I get on a plane, I'm not looking out the window at the landscape. I care about the city I'm arriving in, baby. He was like all about that. And I was just like, no. And I was like, no, I don't believe in that at all. Like, if I'm not enjoying the process, the journey, why should I even care about the destination? Like, the destination, guess what happens when you reach a destination? You're on to the next thing. But sometimes I feel like we're not ready for the next thing because we really want to enjoy the journey. And it's quite interesting. The more I think about that, I think that's why I called my company, which has now become like my alter ego, All Terrain Architect, because I really do enjoy the terrain. Everything that I do is a challenge, and I appreciate those obstacles, and I learn from them. And then I like educating about my experiences. And so yeah, I'm definitely all about the journey. So Grant, if you're listening, not about the destination. And my book, by the way, is called All Terrain Architect: Destination Discovery. So yeah, he should read that.
So what has been your favorite destination in your travels?
That's a hard question. I've been very fortunate that my mom, I don't know how she did it. Thankfully, in England, you get a lot more travel paid than you do in the States. You get like 6 weeks paid vacation in England for a regular day job. So my mom definitely took advantage of those things and saved every penny to take us on some wild adventures. So my favorite country that I've ever been to is probably New Zealand. I haven't been in 20 years, no, gosh, 25 years. But that country is like the whole of the United States in a country the size of Florida. The two islands geographically are probably not that much bigger than Florida. That's how wild that place is geographically. Historically, I'm really biased to where I'm from, England. If you haven't been, it's not about London. Obviously you're going to land there. or you could land in Manchester if you want, but most flights from the US are going to be in London. So you check that out, but then you immediately go in any direction, north, south, east, west, into a car in the countryside, and you will see some of the most beautiful country you've ever seen. And England is, smaller than Florida as well. A lot of Europe is like that. So, you could go anywhere in Europe and appreciate that. People say their food is better there, but we've come a long way since the 90s. We've had to. So I don't allow the food excuse anymore. And then for the United States, a part of my bucket list is all the national parks. So definitely go out there and see what our country's nature has to offer. I mean, the first time I saw the Grand Canyon, I had tears in my eyes. Like there's nowhere else on the earth that has that. There's canyons obviously around the world, but there's the Himalayas. It's just something that's amazing. And I forgot what president it was. I think it was Teddy Roosevelt, but what he did as president to preserve our national park system and make that happen, and upkeep it for us as citizens, residents, or even tourists to enjoy, like that may have been like one of the best gifts a president could have done. So definitely check those out. I've done like 10 of them so far.
Nice. You've got another question about term life. Let me share it to you.
Getting into the financial stuff.
When looking for good companies for whole life policies, are there any things you recommend that people look
for term?
For whole life policies.
For whole life. Well, again, health is the most important thing. So also, I didn't really mention this. If you're a smoker or a big drinker, you either lie about it and they'll find out, or just don't do it, and then they'll reward you after the fact. But though that's critical. You're always going to get the best underwriting if you're not a smoker or a drinker. And I love beer and wine, so like I got away with it. So again, that was the age thing that helped me.
But what are things that they should look for? Like if they were going to compare some policies, what are the
companies, right? Yeah, companies. So always look for a company that's at least 100 years old or as close to it. There are some young companies out there, and if my angel was still on the call, I'm sure he could put in the chat. There are younger companies out there that do very well, and they have a high rating according to FDIC, FINRA, all that stuff, SEC. But if you want something that's safe, tried, true, it's not going to let you down, then it's got to be one of those. There's probably 10 companies or less that are over 100 years old, but those ones, at least you can feel pretty good that they're not going anywhere, because there were banks that shut down during COVID that no one expected, and they only insured people up to a certain amount of money. And this is another one of my advices too: don't put 6 figures in the bank. I mean, that's crazy. If there are people that do that, then good for you if you want to take that kind of risk. But to me, that's riskier than putting all your money like in the stock market, because one, it can get hacked, especially if you've got a debit card that's linked to Amazon. That's just crazy. But again, it's actually losing money because of inflation. So yeah, people can reach out to me more about this, and then I can put them in better directions as well, because there's no one size fits all when it comes to insurance. But the one thing I'll tell you about life insurance is that you shouldn't treat it like car insurance. Car insurance, yeah, get the cheapest you can, because that's just an annoying monthly payment. And guess what? When you get an offender bender, everyone pays anyway. So it's not really helping you. It just is, and is what it is situation, unfortunately. Same with home insurance, which I'm learning right now. I have a roof leak, and what a nightmare that process has been through. But loving the journey though. I was on my roof patching it up just to buy myself some more time. But yeah, life insurance. I mean, when you get it not right, not if, the benefits are just plethora. It's always for me been a why didn't I do this earlier situation. And I'm young. When I tell this to my parents, they're like so not anti, but it's almost like they're jealous, and they're like, yeah, no, I'm just not doing that. Like, I'm just going to keep the one policy I have that sucks, and good for you, son, kind of mindset.
But what are some of the things that maybe they should be looking for as comparisons? Like, is it the rate? Is it the, like, I mean, then the rate at which it's earning? Is it
Yeah. So I mean,
for borrowing?
that most of the companies won't advertise on their website all of the minutia benefits that I'm kind of getting into. They're just going to say 100-year-old company, we offer all these different types of policies. The ones that I would try to stay away from are variable, because variable means up and down. That means the account is tied to the stock market. If that's what you want, then just go to the S&P 500 at that point. There's universal life policies, which from the 80s until the early 2000s had a very bad rap. They've kind of fixed it now with indexed policies. So if you see a policy that is like a individual universal life policy, that could be a really good one. Because now when you're indexed, it's like a staircase. It's gradually growing and it will never decrease. Once it's hit a threshold, your money stays there and now it can only grow. So when the stock market goes down, your money stays where it is. So an indexed universal life can do that for you. And that's what I actually got for my children. Each of my 3 children have universal life policies earning up to a maximum of 13.5% and then a minimum of 0.75%. So actually they're always growing. Even when times are tough, they're still going to get that less than 1%, which is incredible, because all of my accounts, when the market's down, you just stay where you're at. The only way it can grow is if I put more cash that I've earned into the policy. A key term also is if you see, well, you will see this when you get it, MEC, which stands for a modified endowment contract. That basically means you never want your life insurance policy to achieve an MEC, because if that happens, it doesn't become void, but it can no longer be in effect as an insurance policy. You basically now have ended the contract because you've violated their terms, and now you've got to take the cash as is, and you lose the life insurance. You would have to go get another life insurance policy, basically, if you want to protect your income and get a death benefit. The good thing about these insurance companies is if you have a high death benefit, like say of $1 million at least, your modified endowment contract amount could be 200 grand. And unless you're someone who's just throwing 200K into an account, you're probably okay. You know what I mean? So let's say you got a $20,000 bonus from work and you're really intelligent about it, and you're like, I'm not going to splurge, I'm not going to do anything. Maybe I'll just buy 1 pair of shoes and then I'll put the other 19 something in the account. Like, yes, do that. You should actually put the whole thing in, remember, and then you take a loan out for $200 to go buy the shoes you really want, instead of being cheap on, the shoes that are on sale. Because now, remember, your money is here, and then you're taking a loan against yourself, and you're not losing. So yeah, I mean, there's so many things to understand about this. There's books about it. Most authors are trusted and respected in the industry. I don't want to end on this, so we can ask another question of this, but the problem with the financial industry, it's very similar to the pharmaceutical industry, where there's billions of dollars involved, there's corruption. So as a life, even though I'm an architect with an architect license in Florida and Nevada, I also have my life insurance license. And that means I get to take continuing education in financial education. And a mandatory course that you have to take every year is AML, which is basically money laundering. Anti-money laundering is what the AML stands for. And it's a huge topic, because unfortunately, even the most, ethical people that have a lot of integrity, they could come across someone with very bad intentions that is a very skilled influencer, and they can get them to sell them a life insurance policy for the wrong reasons. So it's funny, when I take the continuing education, sometimes the cartels always come up from the 80s. And that is still something that scares the heck out of this country to this day, because the cartels were smart enough, when they were coming into Miami, they would meet, wealthy individuals, and they're like, well, what do you do with your money that, like, the government can't touch, and, it's basically hidden and protected? And rich people, while they're having their Cuban coffee in Miami, they're like, oh, life insurance policy. And they're like, oh yeah, how do you get that? They're like, just go apply for one. And, as long as you don't have a criminal record. So the cartels would just throw innocent guys down there with the wads of cash. And they're like, yeah, I want a life insurance policy, 25 years old. They're going to get the maximum everything. They see that they're a legal resident of the United States, even though they, weren't born here. That kind of led into a very large corruption where on paper, everything was well intended, but obviously the money was dirty. No one knew it was coming from. And once it's in a life insurance policy now, meaning that it's with a bank, it's washed. It's laundered legally now and is untraceable. So they are extremely strict now. When you get underwritten for a life insurance policy, it could take a minimum of 3 weeks to get approved. So if you got cash and you're like, oh yeah, I'm just going to go get a policy tomorrow, yeah, you're not going to get it until December if you went out tomorrow. And that shouldn't upset you. That should just inspire you to know that it's safe, legal, and that goes to show that when your money does go with that company, that you can feel pretty good about its operations. If someone's saying, yeah, I'll take your money tomorrow and you'll be good to go, that should actually be a red flag. So that's something to think about for sure as well.
So, Artie, you have all this experience, like you've just spouted after one financial instrument after another. Have you thought about putting all this together? How about writing a book or an online book or something that people could access all of your knowledge and experience?
So yeah, so in my book that's part of university curriculum, I touch on this, but I try to keep the book architectural so that it can satisfy the university's syllabus that I created for them, that I actually did in leadership. But no, you're right. I mean, the more I talk about it, the more I think about it. I mean, it just, I guess it gets to be the next book.
Great idea.
Yeah, and you said that you've got kind of like a list of like books and podcasts and things that you listen to that you would recommend. So for people that are interested in getting started on building multiple streams of income and exploring some of the suggestions that you've got, what would you recommend?
Well, the book that changed my life and was a woulda, shoulda, coulda in reading as a child, I would recommend giving this to your child as soon as you believe they're a good reader, is Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. That changed my life. I still read it. I try to read it once a year. I definitely listen to it once a year on Audible because it's just a great storytelling, all factual information within reason by Robert himself. But his rich dad was his best friend's dad, and his poor dad was his biological dad. And even though his biological dad was the head of education of Hawaii, so he made back in 1970, 150, which would be like a millionaire today, he made poor financial decisions, still lived paycheck to paycheck, lived in a mansion, had all the fancy cars, but nothing really, at the end of the day to put to his name, so to speak. So when he retired, he was in a lot of trouble. Whereas his rich dad, when they were kids, he only had a couple of small businesses, retail, stores. But once he started buying property, renting out homes, buying businesses, and then he sold it all when they were graduating high school and bought a hotel. This is where the term, I think, was coined for like the Monopoly game. You sell 4 green houses and buy 1 red hotel. That's kind of where Robert Kiyosaki got that from. And it's not just in the board game, it's true in life. Like you need to build your way up, but instead of just accumulating 100 of something, it gets really complicated to manage all of that stuff. So once you can consolidate it into a massive instrument, then that's just going to make your life easier. It's going to pay you more. But to get to that level of sophistication, you need to start small and grow, which is kind of like what I do with the life insurance policies. And the guy that influenced me on the life insurance policies was a guy named Garrett Gunderson. He's got a really awesome book called Killing Sacred Cows. There's actually a second edition of it. He also owns a company. He might have sold it actually now. It's based out of Utah, called Wealth Factory. So if you type Wealth Factory in Instagram, or even just go on Google and look at the website, I'm actually subscribed to their monthly subscription and still get advice from them today, because they have an app and I can watch a 7-minute video on taxes that is relevant to 2025 Whereas when I was reading Garrett's books, I'm getting information from like the year 2000. It's, even though it's still helpful today, it's outdated, right? So at least his company that he sold, and now he's extremely wealthy, that app helps me make critical decisions, today.
Maybe you could create that app for the average person to have your knowledge in an app. Like you say, books get outdated. You're telling the story around one of the most famous money people, Kiyosaki. Maybe that's something you could do, Artie. Create an app for all this information for people to track what they're learning and creating their wealth.
Yeah. I mean, it's unlimited what you could do, right? I mean, when I tell people that get really frustrated because, when they go to sleep at night, and I can relate because this still happens to me today. If you have an amazing idea that you believe is amazing and you don't write it down immediately, when you wake up, you will forget it. And I'm at the point where, like, I mean, I've been journaling pretty much my whole adult life since I was a teenager. But there are many times where I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to write that one down, not because I'm lazy, not because I don't want to get out of bed at this moment, but because it doesn't align with my investor DNA, is actually what Garrett Gunderson called it. And what he means by your investor DNA is what your financial persona is. So, it's like having your favorite sport versus the sport you're good at. You suck at basketball, you're really good at soccer. You got to make a decision. Which one are you going to do? If you do both, then this is what's going to come out of that, where you're going to sacrifice with the one you're really good at. Blah blah blah. You can kind of delve into that however you want. So, like with architecture, my stepdad always asks me, "Oh, what's your specialty? What's your niche?" And I'm like, well, I actually don't like my niche, but it's the one that generates 80% of my income. So I kind of get to do that one a lot. And he's like, well, why aren't you doing the one that makes you happier? I said, well, to be honest, the one that makes me happier is the one without complaining clients. But that's almost, I don't want to say impossible because that's going against the 100%, but it's very difficult to achieve. So I definitely take advantage of the one that makes me the most money, and I find the light in all of those projects. And then when I get the ones that truly make me happy, I tend to lose money on them because I spend more time on them because I'm just so in love with the project. And that is an architect's dilemma. You know what I mean? It's like a chef, being the best at making pasta, but then when they go to make a souffle, even though that's a dessert versus entree, whatever, it's and I worked with a chef in a restaurant as one of my day jobs, and I remember him telling me this, like, you get to be a professional at all times, but if you spend too much time on something, that's why Gordon Ramsay's cursing on TV all the time in Hell's Kitchen, because you know time is of the essence. The customer needs to get the food by a certain amount of time, and then if it looks like shit, then we just screwed everything up. So you need to focus. So I mean, I'm at the point in my life where I definitely do want to write that book, Robin, and I know I've got a lot of information that I can share to the novice financial investor, because I'm not a sophisticated investor, but I visit a lot of schools, and then with my nonprofit, I'm doing a lot of public speaking to people my age and younger. So I'm reaching an audience. It's not as big as I'd like to. Like, that's why I love doing these podcasts now, because now we can reach a wider audience. But yeah, I just want to do more of stuff like this because yeah, it's easier because we're live, and people can kind of take notes and go from there. Writing the book, I'll tell you what, it took me 2 years to come up with the idea for my book, and if it wasn't for leadership, where I wrote the manuscript in 4 months, I took 2 years of information and notes and then cranked the thing out during 100 days. That was wild. So I mean, of course, anything is possible if you really want to make it happen. But I also like to enjoy the journey. I don't want to be a Grant Cardone and be like, screw the journey, just get the book. You know what I mean? So I know that's not what you meant, but that's just how I'm analyzing it right now. But the promoter in me is just going to do it anyway at some point. So
Beautiful.
You're a lot of fun for an analyzer. You have a lot of promoter in you, and you're obviously very intelligent. What fun tonight to hear your context and your look at money and what to do with it. Thank you so much.
thank you.
Yeah, any final thoughts? I know one of the things you like to talk to people about too is failure and how to reframe it.
You just got to be responsible for your life. And once I started taking that, I always used to say, yeah, I take accountability. I know where I went wrong and things of that nature. But when I truly started being fully responsible and accountable for my life and my actions and lived in declaration, which was another thing that you guys taught me, that that then changed my whole meaning on purpose, because I always used to tell myself, okay, I just, all I want to do is just live a purposeful life, because then I can feel good about myself. And then, anytime I make a mistake, I can just ask for forgiveness and repent and all that stuff. But once the intention is there, you believe in yourself, that is purpose. And then really that leads to transformation. So Diana, as you guys know, my girlfriend, I mean, gosh, she keeps me on my toes, man. But I used to be a poor listener, which I didn't realize, because I definitely listen to people and I take in what they said. But I would always be that person that was thinking of a question to ask you, because I'm taking in what you're saying, right? But as I'm now thinking about that question to ask you, that means I'm now missing the next information. And I sometimes do that with her. And my excuse is that I am excited about what she has to say, right? And I'm like, I just want to show that I care. And like, babe, like, this. And so again, after leadership, I do my very best, of course, with her, but with everyone now, and my children as well, which I notice a lot more now. I'm doing a better job, is that I'm silent for, everything that you got to say. I truly take it in. And if I do just so happen to interrupt you, like, my bad, but it's only because you just said something that fired me up. Like, I'm just like, wow, I feel the passion. I want to jump on the bandwagon and support you. But by not interrupting, I have transformed the responsibility that I was just talking about, because now I'm being responsible with you, in like an empathetic way, if you will. And then we haven't really mentioned this word today, which is part of my mantra. That's leadership. When you leading isn't just telling people and guiding people, it's listening and receiving people, and then that's giving. And the results that you can achieve individually are a fraction of what you can do collaboratively. And another thing that I just thought of that you guys told me is, what are you creating today? That used to actually piss me off when Ravi would say that to me every phone call, because I'm like, you know what I'm creating, man? Like, but it's true, because when you think about it, you can easily be off track, or maybe you're just saying something to say something. You actually don't believe in what you actually said you are creating. And I'm not saying that, you need to wake up every morning and be like, okay, today I'm creating this. And if I don't, I'm a loser, a failure. Like, no, that's all I'm saying. But just believing in yourself, having that intention, being responsible, your true authentic self, listening rather than, doing all the talking, walk the walk. Just look in the mirror when you first wake up and like kind of have that quick conversation with yourself, which is what I do, because as you can tell, I'm a little ADD. Um, don't believe in that stuff though. It allows me to refocus the energy into something positive. And when I started doing it in a way that was more selfless, my life just got better, arguably easier, because now I don't have the stress of doing it for me, because the reward I'm going to get from giving is so much more powerful than being selfish. So I think that's a good way to end.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. We know that you are 3 hours ahead on the East Coast, so we appreciate you being up so late with us. This has been fantastic. And, Rob, any final thoughts from you?
Standing ovation, Artie. You totally are an example of somebody who gives everything you've got away. You're just a walking encyclopedia on these questions. And you make it simple for people to understand. And I think it's such a beautiful gift.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Thanks, everybody. So